Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Starhearth Astrology, and I'm here today to talk about the week from March 2nd until March 9th. So I'm going to be talking about the current transits that we're in, the new moon happening almost right at this moment. Actually, a little bit before this, but pretty close. And yeah, so we'll just jump right in. First, I wanted to announce that my astrology group called Practice Astrology Together is opening up for a new quarter. So in this group, we meet for 90 minutes every other week. We go over the transits of that time. We integrate it into our charts. It's a great group format for learning astrology, for integrating what it looks like to really live through transits, for getting to know other people's charts, and for making friends in the astrology world that speak astrology with you. So the first class is March 28th, and that will run 6 sessions almost until the summer solstice. So that's our kind of equinox to summer solstice quarter. So I'd love to see some new faces in there. We have a great group going, and yeah, so you can find all the information and sign up on my website or DM me with questions and we can talk about it. Okay, so at this moment, what we're sitting in is the beginning of the new lunar cycle that begins with the new moon that happened at 9:34 a.m. Pacific time this morning. And so in that moment, the moon can join the sun. They're both very tightly conjoined with Jupiter, which gives this space a hopeful feeling. As I have been saying in so many videos, right, this is a very different Jupiter. This is a very different Pisces season than we've had for the last couple years. So it feels different. And I hope you guys are feeling a little bit of a shift, a little bit of hopefulness, right? It seems like we're kind of emerging out of the pandemic, or at least the pandemic phase, into the endemic phase of this. And there's some little shifts happening. So I hope you guys are connecting with those. The new moon, and I will pull up the chart in the YouTube video version of this. The new moon happens at 12 degrees of Pisces. So if that falls on something in your chart, great, that could be more potent if you're in a solar perfection year or a lunar perfection year or a Jupiter perfection year, or a Pisces perfection year, especially. This one could hit home in that way. It's a new moon in the Pisces area of your chart regardless. So if you think back, you can kind of think back to the full moon in Pisces, which happened on September 23rd, I think, right on the fall equinox. I think it was right in there. Or it happened at 23 degrees. But I think it happened at 28 degrees on like the 22nd or the 23rd. So if you can think back to that time, especially if you're a journaler, track how the stuff that was really dominating your mind then has moved into a new phase, is coming to, right? All of your energy was devoted to it, and now it's kind of wrapping up a cycle and beginning a new cycle in this area of your chart. I know for me, the past 6 months has definitely been about my relationship with how I create my own resources, usually through money and career and stuff. And so navigating, starting my own private practice, starting to work professionally as a therapist after the birth of my child, and then how my astrology business has responded to that has gone through a lot of different phases. And I'm an Aquarius rising, so Pisces is my whole sign's second house of finances. So that's kind of how I'm tracking that. And so we have this beginning, but as with all beginnings, we don't see the end at the beginning. If you do that, that's not really a beginning, right? It's powerful to have goals, but I think that goals really, right? Goals are an evolution of a wish or a dream. And a new moon is really the wish or the dream phase or the vague sense of fate leading you towards somewhere, right? The call to adventure. It's not until we get to the waxing crescent or even the first quarter that we contextualize it into goals that we set for the culmination of the thing, that we know what the culmination, the full moon of the thing is going to look like. So that's just to say, pull inward, and it's okay if things don't have concrete forms. Now, the aspect that also perfected this morning was Mercury conjunct Saturn. So that can pull our thoughts into heavier spaces, and then Pisces is going to feel that emotionally in our emotional body. So that can feel a little bit heavy. So if what you're feeling is grief, that's fine too. Pisces is a good container for that, but the Mercury conjunct Saturn, in as much as it can pull it down into a sense of pessimism, can also ground it in pragmatism so that we're not taking on too much. We know what we can physically carry. And we're also not getting lost too much in the fantastical side of Pisces. So for this conjunction to happen, Mercury conjunct Saturn and Aquarius is keeping us pretty cerebral, pretty grounded, and okay, what are we trying to do? But there's some weight to it. Now, moving into the rest of the week, you can see on the chart in the YouTube video, we have Mars and Venus moving very close to a conjunction with Pluto, which happens tomorrow on Thursday, the 3rd. So Venus has technically moved out of the shadow of her retrograde. She did that on March 1st, but I'm not really counting it this time because her conjunction with Pluto was such a fixture of this retrograde that until she's through that conjunction, that third hit of that conjunction, I'm still feeling like we're deep in the recesses of the themes of the Venus retrograde. Changing our system of values, changing the way that we relate to our values, changing what we're willing to do and for how much money or for how long or for at what personal cost. Pluto can make things seem really kind of life or death. And so we might have those extreme feelings come up. We might be wrestling with that, right? The great resignation that people are calling it when everyone quit their jobs was in the shadow of the Venus retrograde, right? That was in November and December before Venus went retrograde. So this questioning of what is our worth really kind of sees its kind of final iteration in the next couple of days. But Mars is also part of it. And what does Mars do? Mars separates. Mars is the blade that cuts things apart. And so we might see that in a more emphatic, more violent way. A Mars-Pluto conjunction can be very explosive. And so when we're looking on the world stage in the current political state, we might see people kind of really going overboard in some extreme acts of violence that will be quite shocking. Yeah. So they both can join Pluto on Thursday. Then on Saturday, we have kind of 3 big things happen. So it's kind of a big week because this week is really kind of just a big shift change because we have the new moon that's like, okay, we're in a new lunar month. We're working on new stuff. We have still in the dark phase of the moon. So before she hits the waxing crescent, which she does on Sunday, first thing on Sunday morning. So still in the dark, we have Venus closing out the cycle with Pluto. And then on Saturday, we have the Sun conjunct Jupiter. So that begins a new Jupiter synodic cycle. So I was really grateful that my friend Jamie Wright, in her wonderful subscription newsletter that goes out on the new moons and full moons, talked about, yes, it is a new moon conjunct Jupiter, but we're at the very, very end of the Jupiter synodic cycle. We're not at the beginning. So, right, so whenever Jupiter and the Sun come together, that begins a new kind of 13-month cycle of Jupiter and the Sun. So that begins on Saturday. And we have Jupiter's so close to the sun right now that we can't see it. So that's part of this renewal process. It goes in, burns up in the heart of the sun, gets purified, and then we get a new Jupiter cycle beginning. So that conjunction happens at almost 15 degrees of Pisces. Jupiter's moving very fast at this point, right? It's only been 2 months and Jupiter has moved halfway through Pisces. And so we get that conjunction, the renewal of that cycle. We might be able to really see Jupiter significations in Pisces if we haven't been feeling them thus far, because the sun's going to come and make that more personal. Then we also have Mars and Venus moving into Aquarius. So Venus being in a new sign for the first time since November, since the first week of November, and Mars entering Aquarius in a new sign for the first time since late January, but they're on to new territory, and they form their second exact conjunction at 0 degrees and 2 arc minutes of Aquarius. So, right, whatever they kind of came together in Capricorn sees a kind of, there's a new plan, there's a re-expression of that, but this time in the sign of Aquarius. It brings the kind of personal into the Aquarian land of the transpersonal. So those are some big changes. Then we have the moon late on Saturday night, almost at midnight on the West Coast, go into Taurus. And we kind of get this like grounding, right? There's still this waxing energy of the moon, but the moon's now in the sign of its exaltation. And so hopefully that's going to help us all feel a little bit more centered. And then the last thing that happens this week is that Mercury goes into Pisces next Wednesday. So I'll be talking about it then. Also, Mercury goes into Pisces. We have Mercury out of Saturn's signs for the first time since mid-December, because it went into Capricorn, stationed retrograde in Aquarius, went back into Capricorn, moved all the way through Aquarius. So we have had Mercury really wrestling with Saturnian stuff, kind of, sobering the mind, but can also bring some kind of pessimism to our thinking. And now it's in Jupiter sign. So hopefully there will be a kind of flush of creativity and connection and more Jupiterian. Also a sense of peace. Right? Jupiter is good with finding the way through things. So we have that as well. My question of the week is not really a question. It is kind of a PSA to tell you all to find your mom's astrology chart. Find your mom's birth chart and compare it to yours. You will save so much time on therapy. Time and money on therapy, understanding that connection, understanding what your primary caretaker, so of course this could be your dad when you were younger as well, understanding how your synastry works with them will give you so much insight into your inner dynamics, what you go to relationships for, wounds that you still have from childhood and why they might be there, and how to move forward with those relationships. I get a lot of questions about moms, but I don't have a lot of people come to me for astrology readings with their moms. And it's like, okay, yeah, you can bring your partner of the year, your partner of the decade, but let's talk about your relationship with your mom or your parents in general, because that will give you this kind of lifelong map of your attachment style. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. Hope you have a good week. I hope you have a peaceful new moon. And I hope that some of you will join our astrology group that begins on March 28th. Okay, bye.